is the former lead guitarist for the Eagles. That was from 1974 through 2001. He co-wrote one of the best-selling songs of all time, Hotel California. He was inducted with the Eagles into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, has 4 Grammys, and helped to sell over 150 million records, and is part of the best-selling album of all time. Total honor to be speaking with Fingers Felder and to talk about his latest album, American Rock and Roll, which is just that. Thank you so much, Don, for being here. And finally, we get to connect.
Absolutely my pleasure. And can't wait to talk to you guys about the new album.
Where did the name Fingers Felder actually come from?
Well, yeah, when I left New York City, I moved to a lovely basement alley view studio apartment on Commonwealth Avenue. It was almost on the corner of Commonwealth and Mass Ave. It was 342 Commonwealth Avenue.
Wow.
And I remember the windows had bars on them because it was right on an alley. And I always thought that was weird because I felt like I was living in a prison, but it was really to keep people that were bums on the alley from breaking into your apartment. So you always slept with one eye open there. Eventually, I wound up moving out to Hingham and lived out there for about a year and a half before I moved to California. But I loved the whole Massachusetts area. Loved going just up near Marblehead and getting lobster rolls and fried clams on the side of the road on my way up to New Hampshire. Just beautiful times there and great memories for me.
You really do have some great times here. That's awesome.
Uh-huh. Matter of fact, one of my longtime friends, a guy named Abe Laboriel Sr., who's an incredibly famous bass player, was going to school at Berklee College of Music, and I was working in this recording studio, and we used to get kids out of Berklee to come in and play, and so he showed up one day, and I went, oh my gosh, you have to play on every record that we make in this studio, because he was the best bass player that ever walked in the door. So not only that, but he wound up playing in L.A., based on that song Heavy Metal that I recorded in the 80s, and All of You, which was the flip side of that, and he just wound up playing a Little Latin Lover on my new American Rock and Roll album.
Everything just comes full circle all the time. I say that to everyone I talk to.
Yeah, he's a great, incredible player. His dad actually was a flamenco guitarist from South America, and when he came to the States, he didn't want to play flamenco guitar. He wanted to study electric bass. But when I was recording Little Latin Lover, I kept thinking, who could I get to play bass on this? Because I played bass on the original demo, and I'm a bit of a klutz when it comes to playing bass. Although I wrote the bass part for Hotel California, I wrote the bass part for One of These Nights. It's just my skills and chops aren't as good as somebody who's so much more proficient. So I thought, Abe would be perfect. He just has that feel. So when he came in, I hadn't seen him for a few years, and he came in and he was just exactly what the doctor ordered. Knowing the right people to call for the right song was really the key to putting that whole album together. Having Slash come in and play on American Rock and Roll was just the perfect choice. He would have never done well playing nylon string guitar on Little Latin Lover. Having Frampton play on a song called The Way Things Have to Be was just, I wrote that song on piano, and the entire time I was playing it on piano, I kept hearing the sound that Peter has when he plays through this big organ speaker that rotates around called the Leslie. And so I called him up and said, I've got this song, I just hear your thing on it. And he went, sure, come on over to my studio. So I flew to Nashville with my little hard drive in my backpack, and about 45 minutes into telling jokes and catching up, we set up his Leslie, and literally 15 minutes. I think he played it 2 or 3 times, and that was about it. And he sang harmony on the choruses with me, and just, choosing the right person for the right sound was really imperative. And for example, that song called Rock You that's on this record, it's like a big stadium kind of, just a fun, up-tempo rock song. I remember looking at pictures back in the 70s of me on stage with the Eagles at Wembley Stadium playing as an opening act for Elton John, and there was like 110,000 people at the stadium, and I went, God, I'd really like to be able to write like a rock anthem, but when I play on these bigger stages, I'd be able to play something that would be appropriate for that. And so I wrote that track, and then I said, I'd really like to do a rock duet with another male vocalist. Who could I Sammy Hagar, fantastic. I had known Sammy since the 80s. We both wrote a song called Heavy Metal for the animated movie. We'd become friends, done a lot of charity work together. So I called him up. He said, sure, come on up. I'd be glad to sing that with you. So I flew up to San Francisco with my little hard drive in my backpack and walked into a studio. And literally an hour later, we had run out of jokes and had caught up on everything. And we sang, 20 minutes. He sang a verse, I sang a verse, he sang a verse, I sang a verse. And then Joe Satriani came in. And I don't know if anybody knows, but to me, Joe Satriani is probably the most proficient, gifted electric guitar player in rock and roll.
He's just pretty amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
He and Steve Vai, and I think Joe actually taught Steve Vai at one point back in history, but the two of them are just ungodly. And here I am. I'm standing in the studio control room with my guitar on, and Joe's sitting there, who I'd never played with before, and we're trying to figure out these harmony parts and trading solos back and forth, and it fell together so well and so easily. It was choosing the right people to be on the right song, which was a wonderful thing, the way it all turned out. To have so many guests, whether it was Richie Sambora and Orianthi, or Joe Satriani, or Slash, or Alex Lifeson from Rush, or Mick Fleetwood, or Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers. Picking the right people to be on the right song, to me, was really one of the most important things to do.
Absolutely. And, going back to teaching, you actually had a famous student back in the day, Tom Petty. I mean, did you see something in him then, knowing that, he would go?
It was funny. Well, it was funny because I had started teaching him guitar in this music store. He was playing bass in this little band called the Epics, and I went out to see them a couple of times, and I remember standing out in the audience when they came out, and Tom had this unbelievable just commitment. When he walked out, he had so much confidence. He used to sing kind of like Bob Dylan and that kind of like whining voice when he sang. And I never at the time thought that he was a great singer. But it turned out that he wrote some incredible songs, and he developed his voice over the years where he became an amazing singer. But I remember standing out in the audience. He must have been about 15 or something at the time. And I was standing next to 3 or 4 girls, and we're watching him, and this girl's going, oh, my God, he's so great. And he's standing there kind of snarling his lips and flipping his hair and singing, and he's had so much confidence that he actually sold you on his performance just by his presence. Bill Clinton has that same kind of just charisma where he walks into a room and people are like, oh, my God, it's Bill Clinton. Some people just have that kind of charm and that charisma, whether they're politicians or musicians or movie stars or whatever they are, and other people don't. I don't care how much talent you've got. If you don't have that ability to sell yourself to other people, to make them believe you, and that self-confidence, then you'll never be successful.
Right. And obviously you made the Eagles believe in you, right? Because in 1974, you got a call from them to do slide guitar work on Good Day in Hell and Already Gone. Now, they had already had a huge presence. So why do you think they called you Don Felder?
I had known Bernie Ledden since high school. He was actually in a high school band with me. And before that, a guy named Stephen Stills was in this band called the Continentals. And Stephen left. And literally within a month, Bernie moved to Gainesville with his dad and was looking for a band, wound up being in my band. We became great friends. He moved back to California. I moved to New York. The whole time he kept calling me and going, you got to come to L.A., man. The music business is out here. It's not in New York, not in Boston. But every time he came through wherever I was, living in New York, living in Boston, I'd go see him. And he'd be playing with the Flying Burrito Brothers. He'd be playing with some other band.
Yeah.
He'd be playing with this band called the Eagles, who were kind of a cowboy band wearing cowboy hats and jeans and cowboy boots, and opening for Yes when I saw them. But when I went to see Bernie, we had always played together, whether it was backstage in the dressing room or whatnot. So I was backstage at that show, gosh, it must have been about 71 or 72, when they came through with Yes, and Bernie and I were just playing like we'd always played. I'm playing guitar, and I started playing some slide, and Glenn went, oh, my God, you got to move to L.A. So the next thing I know, I finally decided to move to L.A. and moved out there, wound up playing ironically enough, in a band called Crosby Nash, with David Crosby and Graham Nash subbing for Stephen, who was out doing his still solo work with Manassas and stuff at the time. So anyway, and then I was still hanging out with my friends when they were in town, going out of the rehearsals, sitting in and jamming and just playing with them. So when they got into the studio, they wanted to move in a more rock direction, more kind of away from their country sound and into more R&B and rock sound. So they called me up to come in and play slide guitar on this song called Good Day in Hell. I went in, just played a session like any other session that I'd played on. I was there about 2 or 3 hours and left, went home, and the next day I got a call from Glenn. They were asking me to join the band. So it just really was something that we had known each other for a long time. They had heard me play, they had seen me, hung around with them, and so after that one session, they asked me to come in and play.
Then you get to hear your song on the radio. Do you remember that moment that you heard your very first song on the radio and what you felt like, where you were?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the first time it really struck me was, I remember Walsh and I, this was, we were touring after Bernie quit, but we were still touring on the One of These Nights record. And I remember Joe and I sitting in the back of some limousine together, goofing around, and the guy had the radio on, and One of These Nights came on, and when it came to the solo, Joe elbowed me and went, "Hey, man, that's you. Listen to that." And it was like, yeah, that is me. I remember that. I wrote that and recorded that a while ago. So anyway, it was one of the moments that kind of stuck in my mind that Joe had to point it out again to me.
I could just see Joe doing that, too.
That's him. That's right. I love him to death. Great guy.
Now, Don, this is your third solo album. You've got jam power, and it's so good. You talk about anthem rock. It's definitely got that. And again, like Slash, Peter Frampton, Sammy Hagar, Mick Fleetwood. What made you decide to bring in all of these amazing artists instead of you just saying, you know what, I'm just going to do an album myself?
I had done that exact thing on my previous album, Road to Forever, where I played everything on it. I played all the guitar parts, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, slide guitar, nylon string guitar, mandolin, pedal steel, everything I did myself. And what I thought it really lacked, it was really perfectly done and well produced, is it just lacked the fire and fun and spontaneity of two people like me and Satriani sitting there playing together and having that moment of excitement and catching that on record, or Peter playing his angelic thing instead of me emulating it, bringing other people's rock star quality onto the record. For American rock and roll, I had always heard, since we toured with Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles in the 70s for about a year and a half, I had always heard Mick's playing as something that stuck in my mind from the early Fleetwood Mac days, starting in the late 60s, early 70s. When he plays, he sounds like the early 70s.
Wow.
So I wanted this album to start with Mick on American rock and roll. And it sets that tone of that era and his style of playing for American rock and roll. And about halfway through, as we get into the 80s and 90s decades, music changed. The drummers became very aggressive with like the Chili Peppers and the Foo Fighters and just a much more, kind of aggressive, edgy, teen spirit approach to drumming. So I got Chad Smith to come in about halfway through the song, and it just steps up from that 70s era to like a different feeling. It's just a more aggressive feeling. You might not even notice it happening when he comes in because it's such a subtle transformation we tried to do. But it was just wonderful to have that effect going on in the rhythm track between the two drummers and having Slash come in and play on it. It was choosing the appropriate people to play on the right songs to get the musical effect that I had in my mind when I wrote and produced the songs.
And Don, you had once said, playing the guitar, you have to be perfect every single time that you play it. When you get on stage today, Do you still feel that pressure, or does it just come so natural to you that it just kind of happens?
Well, it does come very naturally to me, but I really pay a great deal of attention to trying to perform at a level that people have heard for decades now. They've heard Hotel California on the radio thousands of times. I can't go out and make a mistake, play a wrong note, be out of tune, or they'll go, that's not right, because they've heard it so impeccably done on the radio for, 50 years or so. So I really pay a great deal of attention to staying in perfect shape, being able to play those things meticulously as people come to expect and want to hear. And when I can no longer do that, I'll stop. But until then, I really put in the time and effort and energies to maintain myself physically, my playing skills, to not disappoint anybody that's in the audience.
And you totally don't, because I've watched you play, and very recently you've got videos on YouTube, and you are impeccable. And I watch you and say, how after all these years can you play still so amazingly well? And your career has been so long, and you have so many great memories. What do you consider to be one of your best memories from your career?
Wow. I could probably write another 2 or 3 books, like my first book, Heaven and Hell, My Life in the Eagles, which went on to be a New York Times best-selling book, based on that question that you asked me. There's not like one memory, but there's literally thousands of memories of being in the studio, of writing, of producing, of touring. That, as a matter of fact, I'm actually working on another book now, kind of a follow-up to that first book, Heaven and Hell, that will go back and fill in a lot of the other memories and answer this question in far more detail than what I'm able to do in this short interview.
Well, I look totally forward to reading that, and that would be great. And I have to say, Don, incredible honor to chat with you for even just a quick amount of time, get a little tiny sliver of your story. And we're going to be seeing you here in Rhode Island on September 27th at the Greenwich Odeum. You're going to be in London, Paris, and Germany before you even get here. So an early happy birthday to you, which is in a few days.
And thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you.
And you know what, Don, really thank you so much for the music, and I sincerely appreciate you just taking a few minutes to spend some time with us.
Well, a lot of people don't do press or do interviews anymore, and it's between that and now with social media, I'm able to give back contact, responses, interviews, and a lot of the love that I feel from a lot of people that come out to the shows, that love the records, that have followed my career for all these decades, and be able to give them back some of the joy and happiness and a little insight into me and who I am. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this for me.
And that's awesome, because again, if you don't have fans, what do you have?
That's it. That's why you do it, is to make yourself happy by playing and writing music for your fans to enjoy.